Best college football season ever. We're working on it. Welcome to the Voice of College Football and welcome in on a Thursday night. We've got some good games going on even tomorrow night, possibly. Clemson goes to Syracuse, tries to wake up its offense against the Orange. And, of course, Clemson has not been able to score. And Syracuse, hey, I'm going to give Dino Baber some credit because Syracuse has played better football over the last couple of weeks than I thought possible or probable. Also, Oregon against Cal could turn out to be a decent game. We saw a few weeks ago where Oregon struggled for about 3+ quarters against Arizona. So Cal and Oregon on a Friday night along with Syracuse and Clemson. And we'll be right here at the Voice of College Football at some point to be announced tomorrow night during the football action. We welcome in everyone here at the Voice of College Football. Please leave your comments, your questions, your debate topics. Anything you've got for me, I will answer. The phone lines are open at 860-499-3332, and we will get to the phone lines in just a second as soon as we get some calls coming in. And I will post them very soon. We've got a call coming in. Give me just 1 second. 860-499-3332. Keep in mind that you can contribute a number of ways while you're making your way in, whether you're watching this live or watching the replay tonight. Hit that like button. Do me a favor, please hit the like button, even if you don't enjoy my analysis. You don't agree with me, but hey, you like the college football discussion in the live chat? Hey, I at least give you a place to do that. So hit the like button, please, and subscribe here at the Voice of College Football. We just passed 30,000 subs thanks to you. Not thanks to me. I was doing the same thing when I had 300 subs. And 30 subs and 3 subs. So I was doing the same exact thing. So thank you. You guys are amazing. Let me take this first call, but we're going to go through a week 7 of college football and try to find those upsets. Let's find those upsets. But again, you guys know that you produce the show. So I've got certain things that I'd like to talk about, but it all comes down to you. I will answer all your comments and questions. So let's get right to it. Let's hit the phone lines here at the Voice of College Football. Yeah, who's on the line?
Hey, Mark.
The real MVP. Give me 2 seconds here. Want to get you all situated. Uh-oh. Our Bluetooth is not connected. What happened? Something got disconnected. Give me just a second. You know what? Keep going. Keep going. We'll do it the old-fashioned way while I figure this out. Go ahead to real MVP.
So, in terms of people that or teams that could be upsetted, I think one team could get upsetted tomorrow, and I think Clemson has to be on that list. The last time they played at Syracuse, they lost as the number 2 or 3 team in the country. Upsets happen in the Dome for some reason at Syracuse, and they're solid this year. They went out and beat Liberty this year, which is an underrated win, and Clemson has looked horrible. So that's one of the games I think could be an upset. I think Indiana could upset Michigan State. I know a lot of people have been talking about Indiana and written them off because they've lost 3 games, but they lost to Iowa, Cincinnati, and Penn State. A lot of teams would have lost all 3 of those. And then, what other? Oh, yeah, Boston College, if they won against NC State, that's apparently Vegas is NC State favorite. I do not know why. I think Boston College is going to roll NC State.
Roll them.
I think there's a lot of I think the Clemson bias has the. Boston College has played a good team. Is good this year. I think they can win by 10, 14 points.
So Boston College has beaten whom? Who have they beat that's any good?
Well, let me say this. In the ACC, they've got 4 wins.
No, they've got 4 wins. They don't have 4 wins in the ACC. They've got 0 wins, I believe, in the ACC. 0.
Okay, well, I meant they were 4.
They play in the ACC.
Which is
Yeah, they've beaten whomever they've beaten.
Which is
Missouri. I know they beat Missouri. That's their best win. I'm telling you that I expect Boston College. I think that's a coin flip.
Well, I think it should be worthy of an upset alert. It could happen.
What's the point spread on that game?
2 or 3.
That's an upset? We consider that an upset.
It's
a toss-up. That's not an upset.
Okay.
2 or 3 points?
What about... Okay, how about Oklahoma State?
I understand technically it's an upset, but it's at some point, my goodness, 2 or 3 points. I think if you would track 2 or 3 point spreads and who wins that game, it's almost 50-50. It's probably 52-48.
I got you. What about Oklahoma State? They could beat Texas.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course they could beat Texas. Sure.
I mean, I'm curious to see how Texas is going to respond after them getting, one of the hardest losses.
Disappointing, I guess is the right word, losses in college football this season. I mean, that was a great game, but if you're a Texas fan, you were just so close, but yet so far away from beating Oklahoma. Trying to think. Iowa, I think they could be upset this week. They play Purdue. Purdue's an okay team. I'm very curious to see how Iowa played after beating Penn State, a big win for them.
I like that.
You said no 2 or 3 pointers, did you?
I don't really consider that an upset.
Okay, because I have one team I would like to talk about and give a little credit to. And I think it's a big game.
You can talk about whatever game you want to.
Well, okay. Well, I want to give Tennessee a little bit of love real quick. I mean, they're 4-2. Nobody thought they'd be 4-2. If they beat Ole Miss, I mean, that might be a program-changing win for Josh Heupel and them. I know it's only a 3-point spread, but I think that'll be a great game. A lot of points scored in that game.
Yeah, that would be a great win for Heupel. Yes, absolutely. Ole Miss is a quality team. And I'm a little surprised by that point spread. I would think it would have been a little bit higher.
Yeah, it's only 3.
Okay.
So, Arkansas plays Auburn this week. That could be an upset. I think they're about equal. If not, I have more data to say Arkansas's.
Okay, again.
They're equal.
Arkansas and Auburn. I would have no idea who even the favorite is. I don't think that's
Auburn's 5-point favorite.
Because they're at home, I would assume. Are they at home in that game? They're
at home, but still 5's a lot.
Yeah, that's technically an upset. But man, if we start counting 5-point, sure, it's technically an upset. Sure.
Well, I'm not going to be here calling out and saying Georgia's losing in Kentucky.
Sure,
this week.
I'm
not doing 22 points.
I understand that. But I'm not going to sit and watch football on Saturday and think, Arkansas is beating Auburn. Boy, call the neighbors. That's an upset. It's
well, okay.
Arkansas's got a better resume right now than Auburn. They've beaten Texas A&M. They basically, they went on the road and almost beat Ole Miss.
That's why I got the upset alert going for them.
I must be in a little
testy
mood a little bit, to real MVP. You're going to have to bear with me here. Keep going.
Sorry, it's okay, man. Hey, listen, man. I like the push-pull. But not a lot of people push back.
I've had to deal with a lot of annoying people online today.
I'm sorry to hear that.
But I guess without dealing with annoying people, I wouldn't be doing this. So that comes with the deal. Dealing with people like yourself who bring intelligent conversation and we have a good time and we discuss it and we go back and forth, and that's why I'm here. That's what I live for here professionally, is to talk to guys like you, to real MVP. And most everybody
that,
and most everybody else. But there are some people that just I won't go on a rant right now. We're going to run through these lines.
Well, there was somebody that gave me some good advice. He said, just look at the sides. It's usually the majority of people are nice.
Yes.
Don't look
I
at
would
the
agree with
minority. Look at the majority.
Yes. I would agree with
So,
that. Now, I'm going to point out a game to you that I'm looking at right now, and I'm not saying that I really have at this point, even though I'm going to have to make a selection here in the next day, that I'm leaning one way or the other. But I'm more surprised by the point spread in that Pitt is a 5.5 point favorite at Virginia Tech on the road at Virginia Tech. Pitt 5.5.
Yeah, that doesn't make. Maybe it's because they blew Georgia Tech out or something like that. I don't.
Seems a little strong.
The ACC and the Pac-12 is so hard to choose ups because any game could be an upset. I mean, if you told me tomorrow Washington State beat Oregon, I'd be like, well, that's the Pac-12 for you. I mean, the weirdness in those conferences, ACC especially this year, but Pac-12 for a while, it's hard to say it's an upset when there's weirdness every week. I mean, Oregon State's what, 4-2 or 5-1?
4-2.
Who would have seen that coming?
USC was a double-digit favorite against Stanford and Oregon and lost both of those games.
Mm-hmm. Stanford beat Oregon and USC this year.
Yes.
Both on the road.
They beat Oregon at home.
Oregon at home. I apologize.
No,
USC.
I'm just keeping things straight. That's all I do.
Yeah, I know. You fact check me, Mark. It's okay.
Yeah, I'm
we're
a
all
fact
imperfect.
checker. I hate to do it sometimes. I feel kind of bad when some people are on a roll and I got to say, hang on just a second. But
no. Listen,
I want people to fact check me as well. Always fact check me as well.
Yeah. What about BYU versus Baylor? BYU is a 6-point underdog.
Wow. Well, they do have to play with their backup quarterback. I think they're still working on that third string quarterback, and they lost to Boise State at home.
Yeah, 6 is a lot, though.
Yeah.
I think it's possible BYU wins that game. I think that would be a somewhat realistic upset that occurs. And there's one final thing I would like to ask you about, okay? That doesn't have to do with upsets. So somebody brought this situation upon me, and I don't know how to make it, but he called it the Payoff Scenario.
Okay.
He said Wake Forest wins out, which I know you would be a big fan of, so I had to bring it to you. Cincinnati wins out.
Okay.
Oregon wins out. Ohio State wins out and beats Iowa in the Big Ten title game. Alabama wins out and beats Georgia in the Big Ten title game. Oh, boy. Who's the 4 teams in that scenario?
Oh, my. Okay. Alabama's in. Then you didn't bring anybody into the mix in the Big 12?
Oklahoma's undefeated.
They're undefeated.
Undefeated. 13-0.
Undefeated. Oklahoma's in. So Alabama's in, Oklahoma's in. Let's start there. Now we're looking at 2 spots for Ohio State, Oregon, and Wake Forest in Cincinnati.
Iowa's 12-1.
Yeah, they're not going to
get
in
that scenario.
No. They've lost a conference championship game. They're not going to get any love for that. So they're eliminated. You would think that Oregon would get the nod over Ohio State, even though they've got not the resume to back it up. They've got the head-to-head, of course. Wake Forest is undefeated, and Cincinnati's undefeated. You know,
Oklahoma.
I would take a shot. Yeah, we put Oklahoma in. Alabama's in, Oklahoma's in, and then we got Georgia to deal with at 12-1. Good Lord. That is a nightmare scenario, but I love it. It would be
a train wreck and get a lot of people talking.
Yeah, I would personally select, not as the 4 best teams, but as the 4 most deserving teams, Alabama, Oklahoma, Wake Forest, and Oregon. Oregon gets the head-to-head over Ohio State. Cincinnati played a complete garbage schedule, and Wake Forest is undefeated. Those are the teams I believe should be in. Who are the 4 best teams? Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and Oklahoma.
Well, the NCAA College Football Committee has that one annoying fine print thing that says if the team is clearly better than another team, we can jump them over.
Whatever that means.
I have a feeling that
I have no idea.
I have
what
a
that
feeling
means.
they might do that with Ohio State, Oregon.
You know what's clear to
I
me?
have a feeling they'll do what?
Ohio State's better than Rutgers.
That's true.
Oregon's better than Arizona. You know, those things are clear. When they say that they know or somebody's clearly better, that I don't buy that. Not among teams that they're selecting for a college football playoff. They don't know. They don't know. We don't know.
Right. Well, nobody knows.
Nobody knows. Clearly better.
Especially when Oregon went and beat Ohio State on the field. But I thought they used that rule one time to put Alabama in over Ohio State in like 2017.
Yeah,
when Alabama didn't have their conference win, didn't even win their division.
Yeah, so you certainly had your arguing points on both sides. Alabama's were that they had the better record, 11-1, and they also did not have a bad defeat. They lost to Auburn by 2 scores. Ohio State had the bad loss to Iowa, and they were 11-2, but they were the Big Ten champion, and they had a run of better wins than Alabama. Alabama only had like 2 fringe top 15 wins. LSU and Mississippi State that year, and Ohio State had a pretty good run of wins. Wisconsin, Penn State, Michigan, etc. Michigan State were top 15 teams.
But they still put in that Alabama team over, which, I mean, I get it. They won that year, so they put it on the field. But I think Ohio State should have got in.
Yeah, I agree. Just like I believe that Penn State should have been in the playoff over Ohio State in 2016.
Yeah. And I think 2015 TCU should have gotten in over, I think Baylor was or something like that. Baylor, Michigan State. That was wild.
2014 was the Baylor TCU situation. 2014.
Oh.
So
that was a long time ago for me, Mark.
Yeah. Who were you going to kick out there?
Who am I going to pick out of those teams?
Kick out.
Take out in the. That's hard.
Well, we don't have to get in that. All right. Okay. Well, I'm going to take some other calls here. I appreciate the call. Thanks for the upset selections here, because that's what I asked for.
Yeah, Mark, I'm glad to answer the question. I'm glad to provide some insight to the show, and it's always good talking to you.
Always appreciate it, man. Thanks for getting our show off to a great start to Real MVP.
Thank you.
We can always count on the Real MVP. He brings it. Great stuff. Loves the sport. Gets into it. Thank you so much for that. We got 2 calls on the line. We're going to get to them in just a second. I want to remind everyone, when I put a topic, I just do that so every show title does not look the same. Just, hey, Voice of College Football call-in show. Just something to throw out there. I'm not typically like committed to that topic. Like we gotta, and so, you know, it's something to consider. And if you like the topic and you want to go with it, that's great. But I want you guys to talk about whatever you want to talk about. All right, let's hit these phone lines. We've got 3 callers on the line. Welcome to the Voice of College Football.
Good evening, Mark. It's Dominic on the line.
Hey, Dominic. It's been a while.
Yeah, I know. I usually come on here once in a while. So, I got my Week 7 upset.
Oh, okay.
For Saturday.
All right. And they are.
Okay, so, all right. Texas A&M and Missouri.
Okay.
Remember last week when Texas A&M upset Alabama? If they do the same thing to Missouri this week, I would just be mind blown, just like last week.
So you're picking Missouri to beat Texas A&M.
No, I got Texas A&M beating Missouri is what I'm saying.
Okay. That would hardly qualify as an upset. Texas A&M is like an enormous favorite.
Now, I know some people, the previous caller you were just mentioned, didn't want to get into the Kentucky-Georgia matchup, but myself, I did want to get into that. So, both of those teams are ranked, and honestly, I think that could be tough. But if Kentucky somehow pulls off the upset, I would just have no words if they do, if I'm honest.
Okay. You would have no words if Kentucky pulled off the upset. All right. I got that marked down here. Duly noted. Dominic, nothing to say about Kentucky's upset. Got it. All right. I will not be expecting a call from you, or at least not a call about the Kentucky game if they win over Georgia, because you will have nothing to say. Okay.
Yeah.
Next up, what do we got? What else is on your mind?
I actually have one more game.
Okay.
Michigan State versus Indiana.
Okay.
So, Michigan State is number 10, but Indiana's unranked. And I will say one thing right here. If Indiana somehow finds a way to get their good offense going, turn it around and somehow pull off the upset over number 10, Michigan State, I feel like Indiana could just probably move up in the top 25 just a little bit and probably catch up to Texas.
Okay. You're making a Indiana comparison to Texas. Okay. So Indiana going to pull off the upset against Michigan State and get into the top 25?
I'm saying that win over Michigan State possibly will help them catch up to Texas is what I'm saying.
I'm not understanding the comparison between Indiana and Texas just because Texas is 25th. Yeah. Indiana, that would be a great win for Indiana, but Indiana is not going to be ranked regardless of what happens this week. They could win that game 100-0. They're not going to be ranked this week. They might be ranked in like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. I highly doubt it once they start playing some good teams, but it's possible. All right, Dominic, anything else?
I think that's all the games I got for the Week 7 upset.
All right. Mizzou and Texas A&M, Michigan State and Indiana. Okay. Thanks, Dominic. Have a good night.
Yep.
All right. Let's get to our next call here. But first, always love going through the live chat, of course. Mr. HD, thank you so much. Congrats on 30,000 subs. Day one's been here since the beginning. Day one. I'm going to have to look up that sub. I'm not aware of that sub. Have they contacted me? Day one's? Is that a Voice of College Football keeps getting big? We moved to 40K family. Mr. HD, thank you so much for that. That was very nice. We're not going to celebrate 40, though. We didn't celebrate 30. We celebrated like 10, 25, 50. How about 50? Let's get to 50. Man, I'd like to get to 50 in like 3 or 4 months. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
To the man that gives college football its voice, the great Mark Rogers. Hi, and how are you, sir?
Hi, David. I'm doing well. How are you?
If I was doing any better, it would be a sin, Mark.
Oh, boy.
Just happy to be talking college football with you. I wanted to give you a call, Mark. A couple things. Wanted to talk a little bit of Buckeyes, and then want to talk a little bit of college football at large. To the point with the Buckeyes. By the way, good Buckeye talk this week.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it. I want to say I like the way the direction that the Buckeyes are heading. I think Gerdeman struck a very, very good point, by the way, where he had mentioned that the Buckeyes don't necessarily need a, top notch. I mean, we don't need the 85 Bears defense here, to go very far to be a playoff team, or for that matter, to win it all. I think we just need a good defense. We need a reliable defense, especially with the offense that we've got. And I really like the way this offense is looking. I think the offensive line is top notch. I love the group of wide receivers. The big thing that I said before the season that was the key, I said two keys to the season. Number one, how good the back seven of the defense was going to be. And number two, where was C.J. Stroud's ceiling? And I think we're starting to see where C.J. or how capable he is as a quarterback. Now, again, we won't know until we get into the meat of this schedule. I agree. But I do like the strides that he's making at quarterback. And you know what? I just don't see very many holes with his offense as long as he can continue to play at this level, Mark. What are your thoughts?
My thought immediately as you started in on all that, and I agree with those keys to the season and that continued development, both, of course, defensively being a very broad topic, and C.J. Stroud in particular, that I got to say, David, it amazes me, and I'm not pinpointing you, but you as maybe the Buckeye fan that calls me on a regular basis. Certainly I don't want to distinguish anyone in particular, but certainly you're at the forefront of Ohio State fans that talk to me on a regular basis. People were so down after the Tulsa game. And, Akron was basically a throwaway. There's nothing to conclude there.
Sure.
People were so down. And just, you can certainly, I don't recall specifically where you were, besides just showing concern about the defensive fixes and whether C.J. Stroud was going to be a top-level quarterback this season. And so these performances against Rutgers and Maryland, I find them to be hopeful. They're encouraging. I'm not surprised, though. Now, certainly they could have been, instead of 52-13 with a 45-point first half, and instead of 66-17, they could have been more in the 35-20 range, 34-17, 48-31, more in that range. But I'm just finding it amusing because maybe we haven't seen this season out of Ohio State for a few years, where people were just alarmed, running for the nearest bridge. And now they've turned it around based on wins against Rutgers and Maryland.
Well, let me be the first to say, I still have my doubts, Mark, mainly because of where, and we talked about this before, you talked about this with Dave, just the overall strength of this conference right now and where it's at right now. Because I actually think a case can be made that the Big Ten right now, Mark, is the strongest conference in America. I'm going to throw it down. What does Mark Rogers say?
I love the point you're making right there. It sounds like a good video because it's a great debate for the first time in quite some time. I made this statement maybe I don't think it was with Steve Dace, because he just kind of hit me with all those point spreads predictions.
Yeah, you had to do the lines. I saw that.
Yeah, which I find fun. But I don't. I delve into that. But anyway, here's the deal with that, David. I'm more of a facts guy. What what are we actually seeing on the field? What are the results and performance on the field? Not, well, this team's 6-3, but we know that they're loaded with talent, and so we're going to prop them up and expect them to do better. Or this team is 10-0, but they're lucky. They're really not that good. So I say that to say that if we're just looking at on-field performance in 2021, yes, the Big Ten has a sound argument to be the best conference in college football. I think that if you look at what I'll call the periphery evidence, recruiting rankings and NFL draft selections, which of course we don't know what those are going to be from this, but we can pretty much understand that they've been the same for 15 years, that all that evidence still points to the SEC having a fairly substantial gap between them and number 2. Whereas on the field, it's a toss-up. I've run the numbers and I cut a video right near the end of the non-conference games, and we've pretty much seen everything that we can out of conference, especially from the Big Ten. Now the SEC will play those games at the end of the year against the ACC, 4 of them. And so it's close there. But yeah, the SEC, based on results, it's a 6-5 record against the other 4 conferences. It's not anything dominant at all. So I stop where I think you and I differ in our analysis. And when I say differ, I don't mean disagree. I just mean I don't go in this direction. You tend to, it seems like, evaluate the conference games too and come to some kind of conclusion there, where I just say, if you're playing in conference, those are all toss-ups. They're all a win and a loss at the same time. And I'll just make this one last point, Dave, and I want to hear from you, is that the only thing that tells me is how balanced the conference is. It doesn't tell me how good it is. Now, I can watch the games with my eyeballs and say, wow, that conference has an elite team. That conference has a 2016 Clemson team, and they're going to blow away everybody else. Or, wow, this is a typical year in the Pac-12, and there's 4 or 5 teams that are pretty much the same. And so it shows me separation, but every conference game is won and it's lost. So in terms of trying to determine where that conference would rank against the other conferences, I consider it a wash.
Well, I was going to make this point, Mark, and I do put something around what you said as far as how they're playing right now within the conference. And I what I look at is that East. And as I've said to you before, I think when the Big Ten, and I've been one of those Ohio State fans that said, and you can't get around it. When when you have Michigan, Penn State, and Ohio State playing at a top 10 level, the Big Ten is really, really good. And now you have Michigan State that's come to the party. You have a very solid Iowa team, although I think Iowa being the number 2, number 3 team in the country, forget about that. I'm not going to say that. I don't even think Iowa fans think they're the 2nd or 3rd best team in the country. But, they've earned what they've earned by winning the games that they've had to win on their schedule. That being said, do I think Iowa's a top 10 team, top 10, top 12 team? Sure I do. So even if we go there, even if you just say that the Big Ten has 5 of the 12 best teams in the country, which I clearly think they do, that's a pretty nice statement to make right now. Where am I going wrong, Mark?
You're not. Ohio State's one of the 12.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Ohio State's one of the top 12 teams in the country. And I know that people may see a contradiction in the way I rank teams versus the way I talk about teams. I believe Ohio State's the best team in the Big Ten, and I even did during their struggles. Iowa, I believe that it's different. It's difficult to make anything out of that Penn State loss at Iowa because Iowa won the game fair and square, no controversial calls. They earned it. But of course, there's a big asterisk there that I think is reasonable. I think it's reasonable for a Penn State fan. And we did an Iowa hour earlier today, and I stated that when I was we had our guy Corey on here, and you know, he's heard the backlash all week about, oh, Penn State would have won, Penn State would have won. And of course, being an Iowa guy, he's going to defend the win. And I said, I can see it both ways, because it's the game of football and you got to play with who's there, and you can't assume anything and say, well, they lost their quarterback, they would have won the game. At the same time, it's to see the drop off in play where it completely crippled their offense. And that's also the responsibility of James Franklin to have his backup quarterback prepared, like other teams would in the Big Ten. Other teams would, you know, certainly Michigan's preparing J.J. McCarthy, giving him reasonable time, meaningful snaps in big games while the game's still on the line. So they're preparing their backup quarterback. So Penn State didn't prepare theirs, and it cost them. At the same time, yeah, if Sean Clifford plays that game, I believe Penn State wins the game, but I'm not saying that for sure. So it's a difficult evaluation. We'll have to go forward with the games from here. Michigan State, I still want to see a little bit more from them. And it's going to be so amazing to see those 4 teams play in kind of a round robin.
You know, I didn't realize, Mark, I mean, Dace mentioned the line this week. Is it 4 points that Michigan State is favored over Indiana?
Yep, I was just looking at it.
Out of the game?
Yeah, 4.5 points.
Yeah, does that have a certain fishiness quality to it? That was the term he used, and I got to be honest with you, I have to tend to agree with him, especially considering that Penix isn't playing a quarterback.
Yes. So I will say this, that from a prediction standpoint and wanting to get the jump on Vegas and eye those games that I can be like, oh, okay, I think I know something here that, and that's stupid for me to think that, but sometimes I lull myself into that satisfaction that, oh, I think I've targeted one here. I was expecting, well, Michigan State's going to be a substantial favorite. And that was one of the first games that I thought, from a talent standpoint, sure, they're headed in different directions, and the narratives on the 2 seasons are totally going in opposite directions. But from a talent standpoint, those teams are pretty indistinguishable. And we thought Indiana was a better team coming into the season. So I was going to jump on that thinking, okay, Michigan State's going to be like a 8-10 point favorite. I'm going to go out there and grab Indiana, but 4.5. Wow.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, Sparty, the running back walk has really impressed me so far.
Yes.
And they're getting solid quarterback play. I tell you what, you think all that money that Michigan State spent for Mel Tucker now is probably money well spent, right, Mark?
I tell you.
Yeah,
look at this. I thought he was walking into a difficult situation, and I am so impressed with what he's done. And I think it is valid when a head coach takes over a difficult situation, needs to turn a team around, that he is given time, because in certain instances we have seen that pay off after a few years. But it's not impossible. It happens. He seems to be doing it here. Now, do I expect him to continue to win every game? No. If he finishes 9-3, I will consider that, hey, mission accomplished, really strong season. And he just seems like he's a guy that can really run a program and is just a solid guy, determined, knows what he wants out of his team. And they're playing very solid football. And what the one thing that you just brought up to a certain extent was the quarterback play, and certain programs, certain teams, I think you'll agree with this. Just put a certain stereotype in your mind about how they play football. And I mentioned this during the Buckeye show that I've had to break this with Michigan State, because, I have not been when I look at Peyton Thorne play, when I watch him throw the ball and run, he looks like Brian Lewerke to me. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good top
Sure.
5 Big Ten quarterback. But, I don't see an All-American quarterback. And then when I just think of Michigan State, and I've watched them play Northwestern and Miami, and have I seen anything recent? Anyway, saw some quite a bit of the Rutgers game, actually. Anyway, that Kenneth Walker's this dominant on the ground. I guess it slipped by me that they're also producing more explosive pass plays, I think, than anybody in the conference, probably than Ohio State. So they're doing it on both the pass and the run.
Well, their receivers aren't bad. Naylor, the one receiver, and I forget the other wide
Jalen Reed.
receiver's name. Yep. Right. Yes. Well, Clad had a really good stat this week. He said they're one of only 5 teams to have a 300-yard passer, 200-yard rusher, 200-yard receiver all in one game, which is pretty impressive with what they did this past week. So, but I agree with you. I think we're going to learn more about them within the upcoming weeks. This week could be interesting. I did want to get to, in the interest of kind of touching on the other conferences. A good friend of mine is a Georgia fan. I always want to put this out there. Is Georgia a better team with Stetson Bennett as their quarterback or JT Daniels as their quarterback?
It's funny that you say that, because to compare their statistics.
Or does it matter?
Yeah, or does it matter? Exactly. So we tend, and I'll include myself, we know what the expectation is. We know what the recruiting rankings tells us and all that. And it's not that JT Daniels has not lived up to that to a certain extent. Not that he's been an All-American, but he was thrown into the fire at USC in a bad situation. And then he goes to Georgia, and he plays well those final, I think it was 4 games last year. And when he's been on the field this year, he's played reasonably well. I don't think anyone would confuse him with Trevor Lawrence. But to your point, Stetson Bennett, people know he's a 3-star. People know that he walked on, that he just wanted to go to Georgia. People look at his stature. I don't know that people are necessarily looking at his production or his ability to throw the ball. I had a couple people from Georgia, not necessarily where I recorded it, but that I was talking to, who stated that his arm strength just is, and I can't verify this myself, but didn't think that there was much difference in throwing ability between the two quarterbacks.
Right.
Now, you can't compare their statistics. I'm sorry, David. The last thing I'll say is you really can't compare their 2 statistics. So I'm trying to think how this worked out. Last year, Stetson Bennett was the guy that played the difficult opponents. He played Alabama. He played Florida.
Right.
Somebody else in there. JT Daniels played. They had a weak back end of the schedule. He played those 4 games, and before Cincinnati, really carved up Vandy, Missouri, Mississippi State, etc. Now this year, I know JT Daniels obviously played the Clemson game, and I just know that at one point there was a lot to take into context regarding comparing them statistically. But it is an interesting point that you bring up, because there's such different perception about their abilities.
I agree. I think we kind of talked about Bennett's, liabilities a little bit after the Alabama game last year. And, the way Daniels was playing at the end of the year last year, I think a lot of people were big on him coming into this season. And I was just curious. I know Bennett has some ability to move around and use his legs and things like that. But, and as I said, it might not matter. I definitely think Georgia is the best team in the country right now. And maybe they can win with, either quarterback, especially considering they can do everything else, especially with how good they are defensively as well. But it's just going to be interesting because, obviously that's the one thing that's held them back in the past, is just getting enough quarterback play to win it all. And, just to show I'm not a homer, I picked Georgia and Oklahoma in my national championship game. So that was my preseason prediction. So Last point, Mark, I want to ask you, is there any chance a one-loss Big 12 champion gets over a one-loss Big 10 champion? Or does the Big 12 champion have to go undefeated to have a case over a one-loss Big 10 champion?
Well, we saw in 2014, of course, Ohio State, I think the 59-0 may have been the deciding factor. Yeah. So discarding some crazy conference championship result like that, where Iowa wins the Big Ten championship 21-20 and Oklahoma lays waste to Texas in a rematch, 55-3. Reasonable scores in play. I don't see it. I think that the committee will show similar respect to the Big Ten than what the AP and the coaches poll are. And we don't have that direct matchup or comparison to make like we do with Ohio State and Oregon. I don't see that. And we don't have a major non-conference. It would have been one thing, let's say, if Texas would have beaten Arkansas. And let's say Arkansas goes on to a 9-3, 10-2 season. We've seen that in the past. That earned or helped earn Ohio State a bid, in 2016 with the win out of division against Wisconsin and the non-conference win against Oklahoma on the road. We've seen that come into play where it's been like, okay, look at that non-conference win. Well, the Big 12 teams do not have that. None of them at the top.
I tend to agree. Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Mark. Like I said before the season, I was envisioning this season to be a little bit more chaotic. I hope it stays chaotic. Of course, I want that chaos to benefit the Buckeyes, but let's just hope it continues, Mark.
One last thing, David, would be, now that you bring it up that way, I'm trying to think, okay, what would be the cleanest finish? Not that I want to see it like you. I love the unpredictability. But I guess if Georgia sweeps, they're in. If Oklahoma, despite their struggles to date, they're still undefeated. So although they've looked vulnerable, maybe they right the ship and they just clean house and they're undefeated. And then a Big Ten team's undefeated. So there you go. I don't know what that fourth slot, that would be a no-brainer. I guess it would be Cincinnati undefeated if the Pac-12 beats itself up, and the same thing with the ACC, and then Cincinnati's maybe just that fourth team. Or a Alabama. Well, the Alabama loser would be obviously a two-loss team.
See, I'll throw in, just give this some thought, though. If Alabama runs the table and beats an undefeated Georgia in a close game, both teams are getting in, Mark.
Yeah.
So that's two spots.
Sure.
So basically what you could be left with is a choice between a one-loss Pac-12 champion, one-loss or undefeated Big 12 champion, maybe one-loss Ohio State Big 10 champion, undefeated Cincinnati. How do you divvy up those four spots for the last two spots? Right?
Yeah, unfortunately for Ohio State, that loss against Oregon.
Yeah,
and then to me, David, look at Cincinnati's schedule, and I feel bad or contradictory in a sense. Not that I'm contradicting myself this particular season, but I have tried to champion the little guy from the group of five. I want to see them given a chance. But now we get to a place where Cincinnati, I want to give them credit, and I applaud them for going out and scheduling Indiana and Notre Dame. But those wins I know Notre Dame's good, but who makes the playoff based on winning one game? And their second game's going to be SMU. Yeah. That's going to be their second best win, SMU.
Yeah, I would agree. It would have helped if Indiana would have been a good team this year. It's going to help them if Notre Dame runs the table, or at least is 10-2, and then maybe they can face a really good, team in their conference, and they can say, "Oh, we have a top 10 win, a top 15 win, undefeated." Maybe that's not enough though.
And I can't
Be
say that I've
interesting.
really looked into it enough to give you the definitive answer on this, but the American Conference has been so good for the last 3 or 4 years. There's been this stack of teams, Cincinnati, Memphis, UCF, Houston, whomever it's been, and it doesn't seem like those teams exist now. It just seems like nobody's really that good outside of SMU.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be fun to watch, Mark. You take care of yourself now.
All right, David. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right. Unfortunately, a few folks were on the line and gave up. So I apologize for that. They didn't like waiting on the line. I get it. All right. I have left this comment on the screen just because I think it's amusing. So Christopher, who has, okay, all-time George leads and blows everyone away, and number of comments left to the channels. George is just, yeah. Hands down, he is the winner. It's not even close. It doesn't have to be counted. Unfortunately, it cannot be counted unless YouTube has that algorithm somewhere. They don't share it with us. So George has left the most comments all time. But the most comments left in the last 2 months, something like that, ever since he got stirred up about my 1984 BYU video. Chris got just annoyed to no end on my so-called criticism of BYU in 1984 in determining that disputed national championship. He has left the most comments since then. It's not even close. But Chris, I find it, I don't expect anybody else to be amused by this, but since it's my channel here, I find it amused. I don't think I've ever hit the like button. That's, I guess, too much to ask. All right. So I want to get to these super chats. Yakov 22. Mark, maybe you should attend the Clemson-Syracuse game. It's not worth driving that far. I appreciate that. Let's get to these super chats. So I'm blowing by a ton of comments. I apologize there, but got to get to these super chats, and I hate when I miss those when the thing resets. So we got Falconer X. Am I going to be able to post this? I hate when this resets and I can't retrieve the. So anyway, I see it. The little gives me the little icon, but I cannot. Falconer X, thank you so much for the super sticker. Unfortunately, I cannot post it to the screen. I hate when I can't do that, but I cannot post your super sticker to the screen, Falconer X, but you know we love you. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate that. And then I got my guy, Kyle. Let's see what he has to say. Kyle, where is it? Bingo. There we go. Thank you so much, Kyle. Appreciate that so much. Mark, if we replace the playoff committee with a CPU with set algorithms that were set by all conferences and independents, which is better? Okay, I'm following the first portion of that, I believe, that were set by all conferences and independents, which is better? Not quite getting that. What is better is to develop a playoff system that takes the human element out of the equation. That's what's best. So we did a live stream. Kyle, you're probably around for this. We did a live stream in the off season, had a great time. We put up the whiteboard. And again, I don't think that you can deal with a playoff system until you deal with scheduling. That's the most effective way to do it, is get the scheduling fixed, and then the results mean more. The results are more meaningful when the schedules are equitable. Go find the toughest non-conference schedule in college football this year and find the easiest one in college football this year and tell me that those teams should be comparable, that we should. Why are we putting people in a position where they've got to try to figure out, this team played nobody. This team played just a massive slew of tremendous talent, and we're supposed to compare those two teams? That's ridiculous. We recorded a LSU segment tonight, and had nothing to do, of course, with the playoff, but just the survival of LSU and Ed Ogeron and who's going to be the next coach and all of that. And I'm trying to figure out how many games is LSU going to win. And I go back like 3 weeks ago because they played Mississippi State, then Auburn, then Kentucky. Now it's Florida. Oh, my word. Ole Miss, Alabama, Texas A&M. You know, it just doesn't stop. It would be interesting. This LSU team is probably going to go like 5-7 this year. They're 3-3 right now. They've got Louisiana Monroe. That's a 4th win. And they'll beat somebody else. Maybe another game. Maybe they go 6-6. But it could be really bad. If LSU was healthy, they're missing 3 major players in the secondary, and 2 of them are top level. Derek Stingley and Eli Ricks are tremendous players. Kayshon Boutte is, well, our guy Lon Phillip Sullivan calls him the best wide receiver in college football without a doubt. That's, of course, a ridiculous statement. There is considerable doubt. Anyway, he's a top 5 receiver roughly in college football, and he's gone for the season. So my point is, if LSU was fully talented, if they were at full strength, all that talent was brought back and could be miraculously healed and healthy, what about an LSU Cincinnati game? If LSU was motivated, they suddenly said, okay, your 3-3 records out the door. You got new life and you're fully healthy against Cincinnati. My point being that LSU's off the radar, done, finished, but they're also playing a string of games against Mississippi State, Auburn, Kentucky, Florida, Texas A&M, Alabama, Ole Miss. Somebody else was in there. They haven't played Arkansas yet. They still have to play Alabama, Arkansas, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Florida, and they've just got done playing Mississippi State, Auburn, and Kentucky. And Cincinnati's going to go to a college football playoff. Playing who? This is what's wrong with the sport. I can't get over what's coming out of my mouth right now, even though I had it in mind to say it. We've got Cincinnati playing those teams that they play, and we've got LSU playing those teams that they play. And we're trying to compare these teams? All right. Scheduling has to be fixed first. And because teams play in different conferences, it can only be fixed to a certain extent, but at least the scheduling can be equitable outside the conference, and it also can be equitable within the conference. Okay, you can't make a Pac-12 schedule as tough as an SEC schedule. You can't do that. But at least you can make all the Pac-12 schedules within the conference comparable, equitable. I've devised that system. We will recut that video in the off season. So Kyle, I'm not quite understanding. Replace the College Football Playoff Committee with a CPU with set algorithms. Okay. Again, I've got set criteria. Mine go conference champions get in, then wild card selected on number 1, best record. And again, the record is going to be validated and going to be confirmed and going to be, again, more valid because of the schedule fix. And then number 2, head-to-head. 2 teams are like I worked this through. I took my system, my scheduling system, and I applied it to the college football playoff era, 2014 through 20. And there were more. You would think, well, the head-to-head's never going to come into play. It actually did come into play. In 2019 in particular, you had wild cards between Georgia and Florida and Minnesota and Penn State. They were all 10-2 teams. Well, Penn State and Minnesota played. Kick out Penn State. You lost. Georgia and Florida played. Florida, gone. You lost. And there were other examples. So it came up more frequently than I would have guessed. And then you go to a strength of record, which is a algorithm that takes the strength of the schedule, but it also inputs how much you dominated that schedule. So if you just went with strength of schedule, then you would have this team, let's say here, and if this team had just slightly a worse schedule, then they'd be eliminated. But let's say team B had slightly worse schedule, but they dominated that schedule, dominated their opponents, barely lost their losses, and dominated in the wins, whereas the team with the slightly tougher schedule slopped through it. Well, you want to reward the dominance against the schedule too. So it's a combination of strength of schedule and dominance against the schedule. And for those of you who might be saying, well, Mark, you said you were going to build an equitable schedule. So how would there be strength of schedule? Well, you can't predict how good teams are going to be. You can only build an equitable schedule based on the previous season. So you can build it an equitable schedule, and the result is going to be, it's going to be much more equitable than it is now, but you can't guarantee that it's going to be equitable because teams are better or worse each season, and you can't predict that, or you shouldn't. So Kyle, I don't know if I answered your question, but we will fully address that in the off season, as we do each and every off season. All right. I'm going to go to the bottom of the chat here and see what you guys have. And also if we've got some phone calls. No phone calls. People just gave up. That's fine. All right. All right. All right. We've got Chris talking about 1985. Have Cincinnati play Alabama. Oh, Independence being Notre Dame and such. Okay, let me get back to your comment if I can. So, oh, see if I still, okay, I can't go back to your, nope, I can't. So anyway, I hope I answered that. What would make this much easier as well and more structured would be everybody's got to be in a conference. So tell Notre Dame, you know what? You don't want to be in a conference, you're not going to the playoff. So you don't have to join a conference. You can still play games against our teams. BYU, you're going to be in the Big 12 anyway. And you know what? Does UMass and UConn, and do those teams really matter? They don't matter. And I think Chris is going to reprimand me for saying that teams don't matter because that's going to hurt their feelings. Okay. Yes, it matters. I know that they work hard. They do their best. They study the film. They lift the weights. They go through the difficult practices. They do all that. That's all should be validated. That's great. But I'm talking about toward a national championship. They don't matter. UConn doesn't matter. UMass does not matter. Army does not matter. Again, I'm not talking about the individuals themselves, their worth, their work, and its worth. I'm talking about toward a national championship. And, you know, put them in a conference too. This hit me in 2018 because I used to defend Notre Dame. The reason I defended Notre Dame is because they intentionally schedule Very difficult. That's all there is to it. Now, with this watered down ACC component in their schedule and the 5 games that they play against the ACC now, that's changed somewhat. That has lightened the load considerably. So replace Michigan and Michigan State and Purdue with Virginia and Georgia Tech and Wake Forest and whoever. Okay. So Notre Dame's schedules have not been as difficult in the last, how long has this ACC foolishness been going on where they play the ACC, but they're not in the ACC? It's about the stupidest thing imaginable. Let that sink in. Notre Dame signed a contract to play 5 ACC games, and sometimes it's 6 a year, but they're not in the ACC. It's the stupidest thing imaginable. It's just idiotic beyond belief. We're going to sign a contract to play a bunch of teams in a conference, but we're not in the conference. Oh, we had a pandemic that wiped out our schedule. Can you please let us in your conference? So we've got somebody to play this year, but we'll go back to not being in the conference the next year. That was the biggest farce in the world. And the ACC should have said, let's see, this is a family show. I want to say go to, or I want to say you, just screw you. No, join the conference. Do you want to play football in 2020? And I went on and on about this. Many of you were around for this, that this was the perfect opportunity. I jumped on this immediately as soon as Notre Dame's schedule was falling apart. I said, boom, ACC, jump in and say, do you want to play football this year? Sign a 20-year contract, and you're going to be in the ACC. Otherwise, nope, we're not playing you. Nope. We're playing conference-only games, so we're not playing you. Your schedule is toast. It's done. And maybe Notre Dame would have chose to not play football in 2020. That would have been fine. And if I was the ACC, I would have said, we don't care. But no, the ACC steps in, allows Notre Dame to compete for a championship, which the most hilarious thing in the world would have been Notre Dame winning the ACC. Of course, they got blown out against Clemson in the rematch, but just the absurdity and the insult that would have been to the conference, that a team, a program, a school abuses you. You save their season, and they win your conference and then say, nope, we don't want to be in your conference. Nothing's changed. Bye. We won your conference. Give us our conference champion. What an insult to all the teams that have never won a conference championship or played in a conference championship game, which isn't too many in the ACC. Everybody's pretty much made it, haven't they? No Syracuse in a conference championship game. That's it, right? NC State. NC State has never played in the ACC championship game. Syracuse has never played in the ACC championship game. Everybody in the Coastal has played. Clemson, Wake, Florida State, Boston College. Louisville. Yeah, it's Syracuse and NC State. My buddy Dave Doran has never made it to the ACC championship game. So anyway, it hit me the Saturday of the conference championship games in 2018. Notre Dame's schedule was compromised by a number of teams that year having bad seasons. Down seasons from USC, Stanford, Virginia Tech. So a lot of the better game, Florida State, a lot of the better games on Florida State's, on Notre Dame's schedule in 2018 were compromised. So if we looked at the brand names on the schedule, it looked like a tough schedule, but it was weakened considerably by USC going 5-7 and Florida State was 6-7, or maybe they were, 6-7 that year, etc. Virginia Tech 6-7. A lot of marginal teams. Stanford went 4-8 that year, right? No. That was the year after. Anyway, because I had always defended Notre Dame saying, you know what? They play such a tough schedule. And I still credit Notre Dame for going out and trying to play a tough schedule. But now they're hamstrung. They decided that to play the ACC and play those crappy teams in the ACC over and over and over and over. So it's diminished their schedule, but they have always scheduled tough. So I've defended Notre Dame. But then I'm sitting here in 2018 and I'm watching Oklahoma and Ohio State play conference championship games. And I'm thinking one of them is going to be in, one of them out. What's Notre Dame doing today? They're sitting on their couch. They're kicking back, having a cold one collectively, while Oklahoma and Ohio State are having to face championship level competition to fight their way into a playoff, knowing that even if they're successful in winning their conference championship, one of them is going to be left out. Oklahoma avenged its loss to Texas. Ohio State beat Northwestern. Ohio State got left out. Notre Dame played an awful, atrocious first round semifinal college football playoff game in 2018 against Clemson. And what made the narrative even more confirmed was that I'm sitting there watching the college football playoff, Clemson annihilate Notre Dame 30-3, thinking this is poetic justice. Not only should Notre Dame have played in a conference and had to play a 13th game like everybody else did, but they're also playing what should be an ACC championship game. They just played 5 or 6 teams in the ACC this year. Why were they not playing Clemson in the ACC championship game? This should not be a college football playoff game. This should be the ACC championship game. And we should be watching Oklahoma and Ohio State play a college football playoff game. All right. Appreciate another nice contribution coming in. Thank you so much for that. Kyle, thank you. Appreciate that. So a CPU set equally across the board with an algorithm agreed upon and set to determine schedules might be better than the committee. Absolutely, it's better than a committee. I criticize the committee all the time, but I also make it clear that I'm not blaming those people, nor do I feel that they're incompetent. They're not. They're capable. They're smart people. They're doing their best. But the second that this playoff system was announced, it took me about 1.4 seconds to determine that it wouldn't work, because we got 5 conferences, 10 you could argue, 5 conferences, we got 4 spots. So immediately I said, well, the playoff system's not going to work. Who's the mathematician that came up with this playoff system? So again, Kyle, at least, and I'm not saying, I hope you guys realize, just like with my top 25, that actually makes sense, that I'm not saying like this is the only way to do it. I got the perfect solution and this is the only way that it can be done. There are other feasible, sensible ways to do it, but conference champions, wild cards selected by record 1, head-to-head tiebreaker, strength of record tiebreaker. And again, the record is going to be more valid because they're playing like schedules. Baylor's not played a non-conference game against a ranked opponent since 1997. How do they get away with that? Baylor's played a crappy schedule out of conference since 1997. All right. Kyle, thank you so much. Appreciate that so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. What did I miss? Okay. Got to check some phone calls. Anybody here? Yes, yes, yes. The voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Chris.
Hey, Chris. What's going on?
Chris? Oh, I'm in a better mood tonight, so I don't think I'm going to say anything that's going to upset you. At least I hope I don't. I just wanted to let you guys know,
may I say something? I'm sorry to cut you off, but I would like to say something before you get started. I've never found you to be disagreeable or not respectful in any of your phone calls.
Well, I kind of feel like I have been.
Okay.
But,
well, I appreciate that.
I don't mean to be. Yeah.
I don't either. But sometimes I get a little emotional. Of course, we all do. That's.
I even have to take medication to keep my mood in check. I have to take antidepressants. And people know about it, so I get flack thrown at me all the time. But I appreciate that you wouldn't hold anything over me, I guess, that I might have said or done. Or
not at all.
Some people do, so that's why I'm trying. Well, anyway, I just kind of want to, I don't know, Mark, I'm always having to defend, and it's like, oh, I'm a Mormon. You'll see in the chat. That's not why I promote BYU. What I'm doing, I'm just trying to give fair representation where it applies. That's all I'm doing. I'm not trying to push BYU ahead of anybody. That's not what I do. That's not who I am. It might sound like it. The way I respond to things might make it look like I'm doing that, but they're just another team. I did long before I ever knew about this channel. What I did was I went to school for engineering, and so I kind of know at least some of the things that go into. I'm not saying that anything I do is like the last word. It probably isn't, but I calculated BYU to be a top 60 team all time, top 60, and they didn't make it by a lot. They were like 58, 59, something like that. That's where they are. I mean, that's just. That's not me promoting BYU. That's not, oh, well, they're so good, they're top 60. I mean, that's where they are. And then when I tell people, for example, whether people like, for example, when BYU played Michigan, because I remember I was 16 years old when that happened. That was big news at the time. It wasn't like, well, BYU, what are they doing playing Michigan? That was like a big, people were excited about that game. Because I remember I was around. It wasn't like, what are they doing playing Michigan? They're so bad. So it's like people are like trying to rewrite the narrative. Which they can. I mean, let them do it, I guess. But really, when BYU played Michigan, that was a top billing of teams for the Holiday Bowl. I mean, I know people can look down on the Holiday Bowl and say, "Well, what a crappy bowl," but that's really not what was going on. I mean, it got a pretty good rating. I think it got an 8. That's as good as some of those BCS bowls got an 8. I think people kind of like that game. But anyway, that's ancient history. I understand that, but really, kind of what I want to say. I've already kind of told you about it. What I think happened in '84 was what it was is there were several teams that could have won it. I mean, Florida could have won it, Washington could have won it, BYU probably could have won it, and it just turned out the way it did. And there's no real use going back and like saying, well, it should have been this team, it should have been that team. I mean, I think people kind of know what really happened, and what I look at it from my perspective is that it could have been any one of them. So it's like I don't really at that point. I think the argument kind of ends. It doesn't really matter. It's like. I'm not going to take BYU's championship and give it to anybody else. I don't think that's fair to BYU. I think they deserved what they got. Oh, and then the other thing, whether people like it or not, I think Iowa was a pretty good team that year. Yeah, they were 8-4-1. Oh, well, big deal. They were top 25, and they beat Michigan pretty bad that year, and they annihilated Texas 55-17. Chuck Long threw like a record 6 or 7 passes, touchdowns in the Freedom Bowl. And, I think people don't have to like my opinion. That's all it is an opinion. I think BYU and Iowa were probably the two of the best teams of that's why I put them together. I think they deserve it. But, nothing I say goes over too well. So it's like kind of like talking to a brick wall. But I'm not trying to rewrite history. I'm trying to discover it. That's all. Did I lose you?
I'm here. Is it my turn?
Oh, I thought.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So this would be my thought on it. Again, I hope you understand that I produced a video in which the title was Disputed National Championship. I didn't say, I would have titled it BYU should not have won the national championship or BYU did not win the national championship. I would have titled it something to that effect had I stated and come to the conclusion that they in no way earned a national championship. That's not what I said. I said it could be disputed.
Well, I think I agree with that.
Okay. That's point number one.
I don't know that I don't agree with that. I do not just, but it's like I don't agree with the idea that, oh, Washington was better. I think they were about the same. I mean,
okay.
Everything I've discovered, or at least, yeah, that I can tell anyway.
Point number two would be that I produced a few of these videos, just again, analyzing and reviewing certain seasons in which there was a dispute for the national championship, or it could be questioned. And I came to the conclusion, what happened is that I produced these videos and just laid out the schedules, the numbers, the results, etc. And people routinely asked me to make my opinion known, which I had not done before in these videos, that they wanted me to tell them who I believed was the best team. So I simply said, I'm not saying that this particular team is the best team. I'm just saying, if you're going to ask the question of me, I'm not saying that they should be elevated and given some kind of mythical national championship because I said so. I will be the first one who will always say, if two teams never played, I'm the last one to say who would have beaten whom. Now, if it's obvious you're talking about the best team in the country and the worst team in the country, then yes, I think we can reasonably conclude that Georgia would beat Kansas, this year. But I'm talking about really good teams that are competing for a national championship. I'm the last person on earth that would say, oh, definitely Florida would have beaten BYU, or definitely Washington would have beaten BYU, or BYU would have beaten this team or that team. No, when asked, I'll give my opinion and say, I watched all the games. I lived the season, so I have an opinion. And if you want to hear it, then I believe this team was the best team.
Okay.
But I'm not awarding the national championship. And so that's all I've got to say on the subject, I believe. I am, maybe you explained this at one point, but what does Iowa have to do with any of this?
A lot. They have a lot to do with it.
Okay. They lost 4 games.
I know. All right. They did.
Yep.
Independently, BYU, and maybe it's the way I try to explain it. I'm not the best at it. I'm not a very good person as far as, you've been to like Syracuse or wherever it was. You have like your communication, and I don't. That's one of the things I get criticized for, is I have poor communication. But
I think your communication
anyway,
is clear.
well, I've tried to work on it, but anyway, that's kind of beside the point. BYU independently only really qualified for about 2/3 of the championship, and I've done quite a bit of research to kind of look at it, because I want to be fair. I don't want to be like, oh, I'm just trying to prop up a team that doesn't. Independently, they're only about 2, and it kind of measures itself out pretty clearly that way. The last survey I did showed about 8 of the 13 teams that they played were, I don't know what you call it. The way I describe is good. I don't know, the way you describe it probably wouldn't be, but so let's just say, just give me the benefit of the doubt on that one. 8 out of 13, that's about 2/3. So they're only about 2/3 deserving. Well, Iowa comes in and they picked up the slack. But the 8 and 4 is 1/3 deserving, and Iowa tied Wisconsin. Wisconsin almost beat Kentucky. I don't know if you knew that. The only reason they didn't is the clock ran out.
In
I
the
know
bowl
that's not
game.
a good reason to say they didn't win, but yeah.
Yes,
Kentucky,
I'm aware.
Kentucky was 9-3. Okay, well, they tied Wisconsin, and Wisconsin was 7-4-1. BYU actually tied Pittsburgh, even though they didn't. People are going to say they didn't. They did. I mean, Pittsburgh scored a touchdown at the end of the first half that wasn't counted, and it should have been counted. I mean, you got to add 6 points to Pittsburgh's score, and that ties it at 20-20. And I think BYU played to kind of cover the spread because I think at the end of the game they knew that they needed to cover it, and so that's why they won by 6. So when they admitted in like a retrospective, they had a retrospective. Wade Fowler was the one that admitted it. So well, I guess we got lucky there. So really, in reality, they tied Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh, compared to Wisconsin, you have their records together. You get 10, 10, and 3. Well, that's against the spread, right? And so they share the title. BYU shares the title with Iowa. They do. I mean, it might not make sense to you, but it does. It's the fact. It's the truth. And
it's a fact.
When you include Iowa, it takes it from.
How are you elevating a team that went 8-4-1 to a national championship?
Well, they tied BYU. I'm taking Pittsburgh out of it. I'm replacing Pittsburgh and
BYU
Wisconsin
win
that year against the spread. It's against the spread.
Against the spread.
Like I said, if you add Wisconsin's record to Pittsburgh, and you'll see what I'm talking about. You add it together, it's 10, 10, and 3, right? That's a tie.
You cannot compare a team that played a Big Ten schedule, maybe the best conference in America, to what we determined, I remember in a conversation we had, as like the 7th best conference in America, if that. 8th best. Okay. Thanks for the clarification. The 8th best conference in America against arguably the best conference in America.
If you don't count the independent. I included the independents because I figured there were so many independents, they might as well count. They finished behind all the independents. The WAC, yeah. They were 8th behind the independents. 8 of 11. There were 11 total.
Okay.
If you include the independents as like their own thing. Yeah, 8. That's right.
So we
8 out of 11.
For as much as, Chris, I could talk about this for hours, unless I might be pulling some of my hair out, and I do value my hair considerably. But I love talking college football history. We do have other callers, so I will only bring up one other point in all this. If Iowa should be considered, or whatever your terminology is, for a national championship in 1984 as an 8-4-1 team, okay?
They tied Brigham Young. That's why.
Hang on. What is Ohio State in 1984? They beat Iowa by 19 points. They won the Big Ten championship and went to the Rose Bowl. If Iowa's the national champion, then what's Ohio State, like the Super Bowl champion?
No, I'm basically what I'm doing is I'm letting Iowa pull in the slack for BYU. BYU can't cover it by themselves. They need somebody to help pull them in the slack, and that's Iowa. Iowa helps pull in the slack to the championship. They 8-4-1's enough to cover the spread against. That's what it's all about. The spread, it's all about everybody else. And if I can show you that BYU tied Iowa, then that's all that really matters. I mean, they played in 1991 and they tied. I mean, that's kind of a.
But
7 years later, they played in
what championship did we give Ohio State? They were a lot better than Iowa. And you're saying Iowa's got consideration for a national championship with an 8-4 record.
Well, Ohio State lost to USC in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, but they played your national champion, Iowa, and they killed them. And they won the Big Ten. They won the same conference Iowa was in. I'm not.
I know it's kind of a hard concept to understand, but see, Florida tied Louisiana State. Louisiana State was 8-3-1, and if you're going to give a championship to Florida, you have to consider that they tied the same thing. Louisiana State was 8-3-1, and they would have been up there too. Same season. That's what it's based on. It's like based on they both kind of help each other. I mean, it's like Louisiana State helps prop up Florida's schedule too. It's the same thing. It's kind of a strange idea, but they tied each other, and so it's like they kind of work together.
Chris,
it's a different idea, I'll admit, but
I appreciate it.
All right, have a good day.
Have a good night. It doesn't make any sense. Okay. Welcome to the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, man, it's Eric.
Hey, Eric. How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I am doing just fine. You're stressed. Is that what I heard?
No, I was saying you're stressed.
Oh, no. I'm just taking football phone calls about football games.
Speaking of,
if this is stress, then yeah, I can handle this.
well,
This is not even
yeah,
real life, so that's fine.
Speaking of BYU, I was kind of looking forward to Oregon's schedule next year, and for first 3 out of conference games, 2 of them, one of them's against Georgia, and it's a neutral site, but it's not really a neutral site. It's East.
Yep.
And BYU at Autzen, I believe. So 2, really great out of conference games. Love that we're scheduling these now.
Yeah.
But it got me thinking, because the conversation was originally about, hey, we can't go into Georgia next year with a freshman quarterback who really hasn't gotten snaps. So it was a discussion about getting Ty Thompson presumably snaps this year so we don't get embarrassed by Georgia. And the counterpoint was that after this year, Georgia faces a really steep drop-off with loss of talent. And I know they're stacked. They're always stacked. But when people say this is Georgia's year, is it not only, and I'm not up to date on Georgia completely, is it not only that they're so good this year, but perhaps next year, like, those pieces won't be there?
I'm sorry, what was the last portion of that?
I was saying that when people say this is Georgia's year to win the Natty,
Yes.
is it not only because they're so good right now, but because next year they might not have the same chance? Of course.
Well, they're going to lose as much talent as anybody in the country.
But not particularly more.
I'd have to run through. I say that because I'm not saying more than anyone, but as much as anybody in the country, because they're loaded. And so the NFL draft is going to raid their team. Plus, they're going to have as many as anybody in the country in regards to junior eligible players leave.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Someone's saying Oregon should be worrying about Cal. I am. I just didn't think it would be as interesting of a conversation. But yeah, I have Oregon covering, definitely. I think we're got a bad taste in our mouth. I mean, if we don't cover, let's not even mention a loss, but if we don't cover, we have very, very serious issues. We need to put up 35, 40 points for us to be taken seriously again. So
you're saying that not necessarily for you to feel better about the team's performance, but from the standpoint of a resume.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm a diehard Ducks fan, but zooming out and hearing the reasonable criticisms about question marks on our team, I mean, I see those more than anything. And I think really that's what we have to do. We can't, even if we won 28-10, it would be, it'd be a win, but it wouldn't be, it doesn't, nothing is going to match up with Ohio State at this point, that win. But if we want to look impressive, we gotta start moving the ball. And that's a real issue for us right now. I'm actually really hoping that we see some big changes tomorrow. And I think all Ducks fans are.
So if by most people's calculations or the eyeball test, hate to use that term, Ohio State plays better than Oregon the rest of the year, wins a better conference, etc. But they both finish 12-1 conference champions, and there is a one spot available for the college football playoff. Do you see that as clear of a decision as I do, or would your typical Oregon fan, would you be okay with saying, you know what, Ohio State is probably better now? I understand it.
Oh man, this is the whole issue with this. It's like they want viewership. You want to talk about head to head and record and champions, but you also want to talk about who's the better now, the 4 best teams. Like, to me, it's clear that Oregon gets in because of the head-to-head in Columbus, regardless of if and potentially when Ohio State is the better team at the end of the year, assuming we're both 12-1. I think the head-to-head settles the argument, even if there is the asterisk that, yeah, right now Ohio State, might be better, but I think the head-to-head cancels that out. But I'm assuming you're going to take the opposite position.
Why would you assume that?
I mean, I don't know, man. You do a really good job. I didn't even know you were an Ohio State fan until months and months and months after watching you.
Well, here's the deal. Here's my history on two such occasions. One would be pro Ohio State. The other would be pro the other team. So trying to just show that I'm not foolish enough to say I've got no bias, because I think anyone who's invested in anything has a bias. But I do my best to take it out and cut it straight and be neutral. I do my very best. But of course, I don't think anybody can take it completely out. In 2016, Ohio State had certain resume points over Penn State for the final playoff spot. They had a better record. They had better out-of-conference wins. There you go. Penn State had the head-to-head, and they won the Big Ten championship. But they were 11-2. Ohio State 11-1. But Ohio State went on the road and beat Oklahoma and Wisconsin, top 10 teams. But I believed that the head-to-head should win it, plus the conference championship. So I ranted and raved against my team and that Penn State should be in the playoff. Now, in 2017, I did the exact opposite because, again, regardless of the teams, my team just happened to be involved. It's kind of funny that because of what I do here, that if there's been a team that has been in more controversial decisions for the playoff, it's been Ohio State. They've been on the 4-5 line. They were in 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18. The first 5 consecutive years, they were on the 4-5 line. So that just happened to work out that way. But I argued for Ohio State in 2017 against Alabama based on the resume. In this situation, I think it's extremely clear. It's not like Oregon. It's a situation in which we're laying out that Oregon's going to trip up again and then win the Pac-12 championship and be 11-2. No, we're talking about the same exact records, both conference champions. Oregon went to Ohio State, won the game. I don't even have anything to think about. It's Oregon should be in the playoff. That's a breath of fresh air.
Yes, if that is the case. Another interesting scenario I've read about recently, and huge hypothetical here. Georgia drops one game, probably not going to happen, but Georgia drops one game and then loses to Alabama in the Natty or in the SEC championship.
Mm-hmm.
If Alabama has one loss and a win over Georgia, they're obviously going. But if Alabama drops another game, then you have two loss contenders in the SEC. Do either of them get in?
So you've got Georgia losing a game before they get to the championship game.
And then losing the championship.
And Bama
Alabama
already has the loss, and you have Alabama losing another game, but they're still going to win the SEC West unless Texas A&M runs the table. That's the only team, basically. Anyway, so let's say elsewhere in the country, there's either undefeated or one-loss teams win the Pac-12, the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Big 12, not to mention Cincinnati.
Yes.
I think you leave them out.
I think so too, but do you think, I mean, of course, the odds of this are insanely slim, but do you trust the committee to leave them out if that happens? Like, I feel like they'd have to.
They would have to. And then if that happened, just because I want the committee to squirm, I so much would want, and it's not going to happen, but if Wake Forest is undefeated and wins the ACC, if Cincinnati's undefeated, if Iowa's undefeated, or anybody in the Big Ten aside from Ohio State, if they're undefeated, you talk about a cushion. You're undefeated, plus you win conference. They'd have to leave, they definitely have to leave the loser of the championship game out. So that would be Georgia. They'd be gone for sure. But Alabama, and again, I have difficulty with Cincinnati because they don't play anyone.
So what does, I agree. I'm rooting for them because they're, an underdog as much as you can be, being undefeated, but an underdog in terms of conference and prestige. And so going into Notre Dame, how much did that, it didn't mean a whole lot to you.
I will say before we wrap up the Alabama portion of this, because somebody said in response to your scenario, what if a meteor hit the SEC championship stadium?
Oh my gosh, they just lost to Texas A&M.
So, but I will say in response to that comment that we had our guy from Alabama, our sportscaster from Alabama, great guy, Gary Harris. I don't know where that's going to be posted on the SEC channel. Probably already has. But we had a conversation with him. And this guy's a full bore Alabama guy. Has been for years and years and years. He believes Alabama's going to lose one or two more games. I don't think that. But that's what he said.
Yeah, that's absolutely feasible considering what they look like and everything else. And to talk about spoiled fans, Alabama's great, man. Alabama fans should be sitting pretty, but they, yeah. Anyway, I understand that. Moving on, I got one last thing I just wanted to ask you before wrapping this up. A lot of talk about Mario Cristobal going to LSU. That's not happening. No way in hell. But it did get me thinking about Cristobal's future. If he has if we finish, we have two more losses, for instance, or we lost the conference and we kind of go into this period of mediocrity, I think that pushes him out. But what keeps him here? Does he need to win to stay here? And I'm talking about his decision to stay, not, I don't think he's ever going to do poorly enough to be kicked out.
Yeah. Well, I think any coach at that level wants to know that they are capable of winning at that institution, that institution gives them enough from all aspects, the money, the facilities, the support. And again, to be as good as Ohio State and Clemson and Alabama in particular have been for years, it takes a full focus from the administration on down. I've heard Dabo Swinney talk about it and say, our administration at one point decided we want to be as good as anybody in the country in football. And so there's got to be a full buy-in that we're going to give you anything you want. We're going to build world-class facilities. We're going to give you X number of dollars to hire the best coaching staff in the country. You can recruit. You can go anywhere you want. You can have access to planes to go wherever you want at a drop of a hat. All that. You get everything. But on top of that, I would think that you would need a recruiting footprint, and certainly he's done extremely well these last two recruiting classes, going into a third one now that will be the best in the Pac-12. So the reason I bring that up is if you're stuck in Nebraska and you don't feel as though, regardless of the support of the administration and all the money and facilities, that you can recruit at the level you need to compete with Ohio State and Michigan State, et cetera, on the other side, then you may say, you know what, this is great. You've done as much as you can, but I can't win here because I can't bring in players from Florida and Texas consistently at that level. But I would think that it seems as though Mario Cristobal is doing that. So the only, and again, we can't factor in how he likes that area of the country or anything like that. But the only other job-related detriment to being at Oregon would be if the Pac-12 continues to be disrespected, and most of it's its own fault and kind of disregarded. I think if you've got a certain level of ego, you think, you know, we're kind of ignored. Like, we're not getting talked about much. Our conference doesn't get talked about. And there's got to be something about, even though you got a packed house in Autzen Stadium, there's got to be something about consistently going on the road in the Pac-12 and playing in front of, 31,000 people, or the scene that I saw at Stanford a couple of weeks ago. It looked like a high school stadium. Just that doesn't exist rarely does it exist in the SEC or the Big Ten in particular, where there's just this feel of it doesn't, like, people are ignoring us and the national media ignores us and we're playing big time football, but it's just not the same. So even if we're that good, we need somebody else. There has to be some help and support. You kind of can't be great by yourself.
Yeah, that's the feeling. Like, I totally understand your point. Even if Cristobal is immensely successful, stacks classes, stacks conference championships, like, we're pulling all the weight there, and that's always going to it's going to be brought up in a negative fashion when people discuss our team. I can see that. He wants to go play with the big boys, and USC fans, Washington fans, UCLA fans are going to hate me, but in the last 5 to 10 years, Oregon has really separated itself in the Pac-12 and kind of, in a bad way. Like, it's great that we're on top, but what are we on top of?
Yeah. Yeah, I sit here on a Friday night every conference championship weekend, and I'm not going to come on here until the Pac-12 championship game's on and over, because I want to watch the game. I love the Pac-12 championship game. I love all the conference championship games. I want to watch the game, but I know this from doing this, 6, 7, 8 years, that I come on after get hardly anybody calls or wants to talk to me about the Pac-12 championship game. And it's like, even if there was a really good game, they just want to talk, the Big Ten championship game tomorrow, the SEC, and with playoff implications, etc. And nobody really talks about the Pac-12 championship game.
Yeah, we can be the issue that I've seen. I mean, I graduated from the U of O in 2015, so I was there during the Mariota years.
Yeah.
And what I saw was us getting an incredible amount of national attention, and lots of new fans, lots of excitement, and then you fall off a little bit, and it just goes back to the 180 uniforms, 0 national championship. Goes back to that. And, when we beat Ohio State, trending all the way up to number 3, and now it's, you should worry about Cal. So I think that's an issue too. We can be trending, which is nice, but we can't, as of now, and this is what Cristobal is going to have to deal with. I mean, we can't be a giant in a conference like this. I mean, I guess ACC and Clemson might have some argument about that, but I totally understand your point, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for the call. Look at the respect Ohio State's being given. They've lost a game. They haven't beaten anybody good, and boom, they're right back up to what, number 6?
Yeah.
People forget they played Oregon, 4 weeks ago?
Yeah, no, it was people's memory is, but I will be at the game tomorrow, and if you're live after I get done, I will call in.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
Right.
Enjoy the game.
Yeah. Have a good night.
You too. All right. Good crowd tonight. Good calls. Appreciate it. And we'll be here tomorrow night as well. And of course, this past Saturday night was a heck of a show. And I say that not because of me, but because of all of you. We had I think we topped out close to 700 people online live, and it's got about 13,000 views. So thank all of you for that. It was an amazing day of college football, of course, and I hope everyone that watched that makes it on back this Saturday night. We'll be here after and shoot, what we were just talking to the previous caller about, I think that was Eric, talking to him about, this is a perfect example. If I waited until and I used to do this when I was first on, I would wait until all the games were done, pretty much. And because I wanted to watch the Pac-12 games, but my goodness, it's 2:00 in the morning and I'm coming on here, and sure, people would come on, but so I come on at 11:30 after the best primetime games are concluded. Depending if they're a blowout, I'll come on early, but if it's a great finish, I'll wait till the game's over, and I come on here about 11:30 Eastern time on a Saturday night. And basically all the Pac-12 games, not all of them, there are games during the day, but there are at least 2 Pac-12 games, maybe 3 being played while we're doing this. And so I miss those games. I DVR them, but of course, I don't get to them. So they're missed, and everybody hears. There might be 1 or 2 people that'll mention Cal's up 24-17, but they're getting ignored, and people are starting to review even the most ardent college football fans are starting to kind of review the day rather than watch those late night games. They want to talk about everything that just happened in the primetime window. So it's difficult for the Pac-12. The Pac-12 has been its worst enemy, bad grammar. The Pac-12 has been its worst enemy with Larry Scott as commissioner. Now they got him out of the way, and the new guy, Kiasklov, if I pronounce that correctly, it's been a long time since I've said it. I like what I hear from this guy, and he was not a candidate that the media brought up for the job. But as soon as I heard his credentials and his background, I thought, this is the guy. This is the type guy, not necessarily he's the only guy, but he's the type guy to lead the Pac-12 and update the Pac-12 and bring it into the 21st century. He understands. He's a Vegas guy. He's an entertainment guy. He understands entertainment. He understands digital media. He understands the future. He's forward thinking. And he just flat out said, we want to be a great football conference. What I heard out of Larry Scott consistently was he knew he had a great Olympic sport conference. So he knew that he could just kind of let that ride. And basically that was the excuse that we can't be a great football conference because we're great in all these Olympic sports. Well, I hate to say it, but there's a couple times a year that sounds good, or you can put that on some kind of statistic or banner or tweet, and it looks impressive. You won all these championships in tennis and, women's tennis and men's golf and all this other stuff, but nobody watched it. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. That's the bottom line. Nobody cares. I covered athletics at Alabama, meaning the University of Alabama, Mississippi State, and Ole Miss were the 3 primary schools I had to cover. So it was a very unique job that I had as sports director at a CBS station, because I can't imagine, any other market in the country where you had 3 schools of that caliber, SEC schools, and we had to cover them. Like, we had to be at all the games and all the news conferences and everything, because if we ignored Ole Miss, then people would go nuts. And rightfully so. So we had to cover 3 major schools. We were positioned in a place where Ole Miss was 2 hours away. But because of our coverage area, people didn't know. They didn't care that we were 2 hours away physically. We had to cover Ole Miss. And Mississippi State was a half hour away. Alabama was like an hour away. So we had to cover 3 SEC schools. My point was going, football, men's basketball. And at that time, women's basketball was emerging, and the SEC was at the forefront of that, especially Tennessee, of course. And there were crazy rankings at that time in women's basketball where the SEC would have like 7 of the top 10 teams in the country. They were so stacked. This is like the late 90s. Anyway, my point being, we covered everything. So I would go out to Mississippi State to get a little video of a men's tennis match. And it would be, they'd hand me the little fact sheet with a press release so I could keep up with everything and had information. And it might be, wow, Mark, we appreciate you coming out to cover this. So this is a huge match. Mississippi State's number 4 in the country, and they're playing Ole Miss, and they're number 2 in the country. So you got the number 2 tennis team in the country taking on the number 4 tennis team in the country. Do you think anybody's watching that? There's like 14 people watching for free. Nobody cares. It's impressive. It means something. Those schools are coveting the best tennis players in the country that will go to college. So it means something. It's prestigious, but it doesn't make any money and nobody cares. Like if nobody would drive down the street to go see the best college tennis players in the country play, but they'll pay top dollar to go watch a 3-5 college football team that has no shot in hell of winning the SEC West. And I would watch and have to cover all those games against, Ole Miss and Arkansas and all these teams that were no good at the time. But it's football. It's football. So the Pac-12 can either, I think you can have both. They did in the 80s and 90s. They still had the great Olympic sports because they always will, just because of where they're located, their schools, and because of California. But a lot of you, I don't know how old everyone is, of course, but the Pac-12 in the 80s and most of the 90s, the Pac-12 was no joke in football. There were many years, and people didn't seem to talk about conferences as much. Maybe they still did in the Big Ten and the SEC. For some reason, especially the SEC, of course, they are stuck on the conference affiliation, but also in the Big Ten to a certain extent. But I grew up watching college football in the 80s and then into the 90s, and most given years, somebody asked me, who's the best conference? No, the Pac-12. They're right up there. So. James, let me catch up on some of this. Cheryl had some kind of comment I want to see. Don't forget about those of us who watch your end of the day wrap-ups on Saturday that update the ongoing game. I know, James. I know, and that's what I was saying. There are a few people that will say, hey, Washington State just scored a touchdown. It's 27-24, whatever. Yeah, I know. But most people, they're done with the viewing. They're ready to review everything and say, what's going on with the playoff? Mark, I see ORBS on your screen. What are we looking at? Yes, and good in the 2000s. Yes, USC, of course, in particular. Blake Robinson, Mississippi State sold out women's basketball, over 10,000 fans for 4 straight years. So when I was there, nobody went to the games. Then I know they had the big win against UConn to go to the Final Four and all that business. I would be interested how many people paid to go see those games and what did they pay? $5? What did they pay? But that's impressive. And the baseball in the SEC was impressive, and people cared, especially at LSU and Mississippi State and Ole Miss. Bilal says that Ohio State, if they run the table in the Big Ten, are not getting left out for nobody. And I would not be surprised if you're correct, Bilal, but I'm just saying that if I was running the show, how do you get past Oregon, 12-1 Pac-12 champion, Ohio State, 12-1 Big Ten champion? Oregon won in Columbus. And if you watch that game, it's not necessarily down to the wire. It's a close game, one-score game. They outplayed Ohio State in Columbus. And if we're going to get into all this, well, that was back in week 2. And what are we going to weight the games? Do we want to come up with some kind of hockey measurement like they do with the ridiculous point totals and everything, where we actually weight the games? You want to weight the games and say week 1 games are only worth this much, week 2 games are worth that much, week 3, and it incrementally grows. I understand you theoretically want the best teams in at the end, and the best teams weren't playing the best the whole time, but it's a football season. It all counts. It shouldn't be like, oh, okay, well, this team is 8-4, but they won the last 8 in a row. Let's put them in the playoff. Where does that type of philosophy run out? We got Hair Trigger 83 talking about Iowa developmental program, accepting Iowa as a developmental program that does really well at times. Yeah, it's an 8-4 program, 8-4 that jumps up every so often. Yeah, Tony, Nebraska's taken forever, and they're playing so much better, but you got to win a game at some point. Got to win a game at some point. Nick says, as opposed to what Bilal says, Oregon 12-1 in, no debate. Blake, yes. Columbus, Mississippi, WCBI is where I was the sports director. So we had Bureau in Tupelo. All right. Anything else in here I got to hit? Oh, got a call coming in. I think we'll wrap it up with this one. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
That's Peter McNader.
Hey, how's it going? I apologize if you've
Hey.
been waiting.
That's all right. No, I haven't been waiting that long. But
What's on your
just want to
mind?
ask you,
Yeah.
what's the Michigan's chances of beating Ohio State?
20%.
Okay. Why you say that? Just too early of the season?
Why do I say that? Because Ohio State's better than Michigan. But Michigan is improving. They're playing better.
Yes, well, I think it just got to be proven. I'm a big Michigan fan, and I think they just got to do it from the heart. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do it from the heart.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's got to be proven. You can't just go out there and think you're going to win. Everybody thinks they're going to win every year, and they get blown up by 60.
Yeah, I tell you, they do. And who have they really beaten this year?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm from the South, so I mean, I like the team, but I mean, we got to beat them guys. We can't be doing that no more.
So you're a Michigan fan.
Oh, big Michigan fan, go blue. But I ain't going to run your hair. You have run a good show. I appreciate your show so much, but I'm going to sign out Mr. Cleaner McJr., so thanks again.
Thank you so much for the call. Appreciate that. All right. Two other people jumped in here. So these two calls, then we're done for the night. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Anthony.
Anthony, what's going on?
Not too much. I love your work, Mark. And just keep doing what you're doing. It's great
Thank
to
you.
see
Appreciate
an
that.
old Buckeye doing really well. So thank you. Hey, I got to take well, first of all, I want to say it's like 1:30 and Michigan still sucks. So in difference to the call, I think Michigan is not all that. I just think that there are too many holes. But I think that I agree with you. I mean, I'm a huge Ohio State fan, but I think if if Oregon runs the table and Ohio State runs the table, I think Ohio State's gonna have a much better resume. But I played back in the day, and I'm always opposed if people face it on the field. So I 100% agree with you. A 12-1 Ohio State team should pay deference to a 12-1 Oregon team, because I mean, even though I think Ohio State can have a better schedule, I just think that they came to Columbus. I was actually at that game, so they came to Columbus, and you're right, it wasn't they were beating at every phase of the game. Offense, defense, special teams might have been a push, but and they were outcoached, ridiculously outcoached by Oregon. And Oregon was missing the number one player in the draft coming up.
Mm-hmm.
A generational talent in Thibodeau. So I agree with you.
Yeah, they were actually missing 5 defensive players, but you mentioned Kayvon Thibodeau in particular, and it was an impressive performance by Oregon on the road, coming all the way across country, playing a noon game Eastern time, and it's kind of hard to explain or describe the closeness of the game, because it was a 1-score game, and Ohio State did have the ball with about 3.5 minutes when CJ threw the pick that kind of ended a realistic chance when he threw the pick along the sideline. So Ohio State, despite struggling so much defensively and Oregon outplaying them, as you just mentioned, in every phase of the game, Ohio State did almost catch up. They were within 1 score, but kept having the ball there the last few possessions with a chance to. So I actually was watching that game thinking, I believe that Ohio State's going to pull this game out and not really deserve this win, but I expected them to do so. But it's kind of strange because they couldn't be stopped on offense for that long, and their last 3 possessions were empty, where defensively they couldn't stop Oregon the entire game. Then they suddenly got stops the last 3 drives. Well, really the final 2 that mattered, but the last 3 drives, and they turned the ball over to the offense and couldn't get it done. But I have a hard time getting around, and I think that's a difficult situation if this Big Ten continues to show itself as strong as it is right now, that Ohio State could get through all of that. Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, Iowa. Wow, that's going to be 4 tremendous wins. And then Oregon just slopping through the Pac-12, but I can't get around that head-to-head matchup.
Like I said, I think honestly, I mean, personally, based upon much better than I do. You're like an encyclopedia of college football, and I'm just like a small book. But I think that you get the East Coast bias. You got Ohio State's drawing power. I mean, Ohio State. Well, I think this year, I guess the national title game didn't do so well, but usually if Ohio State's in it, the eyes are on it. The Clemson game, I think, was the second most watched game and the third most watched game in college football history. And then I mentally think that there's a good chance Ohio State may get in. They'll find a way to put them in on the strength of schedule. But I agree. I mean, I think that even being a massive Ohio State homer, it's my alma mater that. That they're 12-1 at the end of the season, and then it's you're gonna and they're both conference they won both win the conference, obviously. You got to go with Oregon because they head to head, but I don't know though. I've been watching your top 25 that makes sense, and I know you're maybe a little late on the Buckeyes. I mean, I think I put them a little bit higher. I think you had like 10 or 14, I think, last time.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you? I mean, are you not expecting them to run the table? Do you don't think, or is it is it just the fact that because the schedule's too hard, combination of 3 top 10 teams are going to drop one, or just haven't seen it on the field yet? I mean, what's kind of your thought behind like was it 14 last week? I think.
Yeah, that sounds right. I don't have it in front of me, but that sounds right.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, sir, I appreciate you for not calling me a moron or an idiot or like I get called from time to time that people don't listen to the video and let me explain. So I have my opinion on how good Ohio State is and how good everybody is in the country. So, for example, I believe that Ohio State is the best team in the Big Ten. Now, obviously, that's going to be proven here with the difficult games that they have to play. But I do believe that they have the best team in the Big Ten. But I would not rank them at the top of the Big Ten to have the best resume. So that is strictly a resume ranking. So, for example, I don't know how long you've been watching me, but after the week 1 games, it is a very odd looking ranking because I am basing it strictly on 1 game. That's it. I completely dismiss preseason perception. I am just basing it on 1 win or loss. That's it. So whoever I felt had the best win in the country, Georgia beat Clemson. So based on the information we had at the time, that was the best win in the country. So Georgia was number 1. And I believe might have had Iowa number 2 in the country after they beat, that was Indiana. Anyway, it's a strictly resume. It's not like you see in the AP where if you make it, look at Oklahoma as a perfect example. Sure, they're 6-0 and they're playing better football now and beating some decent teams. But early in the season, they beat Tulane. They had to stop them on 4th down. They won by 5 points. Tulane's not good. They're 1-5. They beat West Virginia on a last-second field goal. West Virginia's 2-4. They, slipped by Nebraska. They just didn't have. They had the wins, so I credited those wins. But I did not have Oklahoma ranked for like the first 3 weeks of the season, because I don't take preseason perception into the rankings with me. So Oklahoma, in my estimation, did not earn a ranking playing lousy football against marginal teams. Now, at this point, they have. So Ohio State's beaten Minnesota by 2 touchdowns. They blew out Rutgers and they blew out Maryland. How good are those teams? Well, I think Minnesota's the best of the 3. I think they are. If we put their resume together.
Very much. Minnesota looks like a hot mess now. So
they beat Purdue. They blew out Colorado. They did stumble against a MAC team. And so Ohio State has 3 wins against teams that are 50th, 60th in the country. That's all they've got at this point. And they lost at home by a touchdown to a team that's got a loss against Stanford. That's their resume right now. The resume's not great.
Yeah. You talking about Oklahoma. I mean, what's going to happen again in Oklahoma if they get in, which they're probably going to. They're going to run into Georgia, and they're just going to get destroyed. It's going to be another, where they just get boat raced. I mean, Georgia's going to shut their offense down, and then they just, and their defense ain't going to stop nobody. Not even a Georgia defense. That's a Georgia offense, which is suspect at best. I think Kirby Smart gets everybody in the world to go there, but he definitely can't.
So
quarterbacks and everybody just can't put together a complete team. But I think though, I think this whole Spencer Rattler thing. I think Lincoln Riley way overreached on Rattler. I think he. Everybody was like, this is Rattler. I mean, he's, I don't know. I always thought that, Ryan Day was a better quarterback guru / whisperer, whatever they're using today for the new terms. But I think this proves, Ryan Day basically has never missed on a quarterback. And, Spencer Rattler was a big miss. And, I'm not, I thought Caleb Williams is a runner. I'll put C.J. Stroud against Caleb Williams anytime, in any day. And I just, and probably even maybe like McCord against, Caleb Williams. And different skill sets, obviously. More of a pass run versus, run pass. But still, I mean, I don't know. I think sometimes over Lincoln Riley is, in his quarterback, he had a lot of like generational talent walking that door. And, and Ryan Day, I think he's proven now with C.J. Stroud and Gordon, depending on what Ewers looks like. I think he's proven himself as the best quarterback coach in the country. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I do think that what you've achieved versus how good you are don't always match. So Lincoln Riley is going to continue, at least at this point, until things change, to be considered that person just because of Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, and Jalen Hurts. The production there, both at the college level and transitioning to the NFL, is just crazy good compared to Dwayne Haskins and Justin Fields at this point.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. It's a good point. There's definitely a drop off in college in the pro ranks.
And before I let you go, I got one question, and I just want to confirm one thing. So again, I do not believe that Ohio State is the 14th best team in the country. I believe they are much better than that. I believe they're one of the 5 best teams in the country. I'm rating them based on a resume, and once they start to play, who's going to be the first big team they play? They've got this week off. Obviously, they got Indiana. Then I think it's going to be Penn State. So,
yeah. I hear Clifford's gonna. I hear a friend of mine. Not that it's not information or anything like that. I think everybody knows now, but supposedly Clifford might not play in that game. So I wonder what the game's going to look like, because that backup quarterback was just a hot mess. So it's going to be interesting.
Well, hopefully they'll have him better prepared at that point. They should have had him better prepared. And this is something that Ohio State did a little bit in the Akron game, and that Michigan's done on a weekly basis with J.J. McCarthy. And so that's on James Franklin. On one hand, we can all say, well, Penn State should have won the game, or maybe it won the game with Sean Clifford, because it was obvious to see the difference in the offense was considerable. But at the same time, it's up to the head coach to prepare the backup quarterback to be ready to play. And they had to, there's going to be a downgrade, but they just completely shut down.
Yeah, I don't know. Talking about J.J. McCarthy, not to get off on a tangent. But I tell you something right now, man. Jim Harbaugh is an idiot. In difference, I think having good. I'm not one of those Ohio State fans. I think they call you like the one Ohio State fan that is, not a goofball or whatever on Basis show. But I think I'll join you, because I think having a good Michigan is important for college football. It's definitely important for Columbus. But man, Jim Harbaugh. I mean, you have a guy you never sit. I mean, you know this, Mark. You never sit a guy that's got NFL arm talent. They don't come around that often. There's only 32 guys that can conceivably do that. Only 12 guys that can do it at a level to win a Super Bowl. They don't come around that often. I mean, you know the history of college football. These guys just don't grow on trees. And when you got a guy like McCarthy that's got NFL level arm talent, there should no way should he be on the bench for a guy that's a game manager. You don't sit Tom Brady for Trent Dilfer. You don't, I mean, I know, there's guys in there like Jeff George had all the arm talent in the world. That was a head case, Ryan Leaf. But you just, in college, you don't sit a guy with arm talent like that. He should be on the field. I mean, the kid throws a beautiful ball, got a cannon for an arm. I mean, I know his body's a little slight, but, Michigan's got a halfway decent line, at least against the lower level. And that kid could have, that kid, honestly, that kid was playing verse. He was playing 90% of snaps, and McNamara was coming in with 10% of stuff. I'd be more worried about this game. That kid's, Ohio State's going to watch him next year. I mean, I know C.J. Stroud's awesome, and that McCarthy kid is he's but I just What are you sitting a guy with NFL arm talent? Someone should go up there and shake Jim Harbaugh. What are you doing?
Well, it's an interesting and valid point that you make in this, that just because these guys are excellent head coaches, let's take Kirby Smart, for example, that doesn't mean that they don't ever make a wrong move or a poor judgment, because Kirby Smart, as it turned out, should have been playing Justin Fields at quarterback at Georgia. He didn't play him. He lost him, and he got by with decent quarterback play. He could have had top 2 to 3 quarterback play in the country, and maybe it cost him a national championship. We'll never know. So your point's well taken about Jim Harbaugh. All right. Anything else?
No, that's it, Mark. Thanks as always, man. Great to have it. I love your Buckeye show, what you do with the local guys here, Gerdeman and Noon and what you call it. I really like that show. It's really informative, guys. You guys make a good combination of old Ohio State stuff, new Ohio State stuff, insider stuff. So definitely enjoy that show. And like I said, thanks for explaining the top 25 a little better. Like I said, I like your formula. It's I think it does make sense. So like I said, hopefully Ohio State will be moving up the polls, up your number when they get some of these tougher games under their belt. So
absolutely.
Have a good night, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Bye.
All right. Last call of the night. Where have you heard that before? Welcome into the voice of college football. Who's on the line? Hey, what's going on tonight?
Nothing much. I have a question for you.
Sure.
Do you think that Harbaugh's gone after the season because he can't beat Ohio State?
No.
You don't think so?
So,
I mean,
yeah, I just don't think Michigan's that cutthroat. I don't think they are. I think they came out of last year, which was a disaster, of course, but it was a short season, and I think they're going to expect him to get over the hump, and maybe that hump's going to be next year that they're looking for. But if he goes, if he would have gone 7-5 this year, but let's say they lose one other game.
That's the season
Let's say they
I expected from Michigan was I'll let you finish.
Yeah, let's say they lose to Penn State or Michigan State. They lose one game, and they go against Ohio State, and they're 10-1, and they don't get embarrassed. They lose 31-21, and they're 10-2. I don't think they're going to fire him for going 10-2 and losing to Ohio State by 10 points.
Yeah, I mean, I see that. I expected Michigan to have like a 7-5 type season this year.
I did too.
Like, all right, Harbaugh's definitely gone after this year. I've been saying for the past few years, like, okay, if Harbaugh doesn't get it done this year against Ohio State, he's done. And I mean, they keep keeping him around, and I'm like, when's it ever going to happen?
Well, here's the thing, and you bring up a good point, because throw out 2020 for a second. Okay, he keeps going 10-3, 9-4, etc. So none of those seasons in and of themselves would be a fireable season really anywhere. Even Ohio State, if they had a coach who one year went 10-3, they're not going to go crazy and just fire Ryan Day because he went 10-3 one year. But at some point, you got to break through and win. You've got to beat your rival. You got to win a Big Ten championship. So he could go 9-4, 10-3 forever. And at some point, they got to say, okay, enough's enough. You haven't done it. This season was not a fireable offense, but the whole resume is a fireable offense, because you keep going 9-4, 10-3, but you're 0 whatever against Ohio State at this point, and you've not delivered a Big Ten championship. And enough's enough. And if that's after like year 7, I would think that that's been plenty of time for him to deliver.
Right. Like, I feel like it'd be different if it was like against, like, I don't know, let's say Penn State was at the top of the Big Ten every year like Ohio State is. Like, he just couldn't beat Penn State. I could see them being like, okay, well, it's Penn State or whatever, like, they're really good. But, like, the thing with Ohio State is because, it's more than just they're at the top of the Big Ten. They're also the rival. I mean, hell, they haven't beaten Ohio State in 8 straight years. Should have been 9 this year if they wouldn't have canceled against this. And I'm like, I just don't know. And they're finally going to just cut the cord with Harbaugh, because I don't see him ever beating Ohio State, honestly.
And the other point that you brought up that could get into the equation would be let's say he does go 10-1 going into Ohio State, but they get trucked again. They get just annihilated. It's a 52-10 game. Then
I think that's going to happen.
Then if I'm running the show, then I say, you know what? This was a good season. This would have kept you here, but you're showing. Had he played Ohio State close within a field goal a zillion years in a row, and then he gets trucked, I would have said, okay, this is a bad look. We don't like it, but we're going to keep you. But, okay, this is a third consecutive annihilation by Ohio State. So even though you had a good season and contended for a Big Ten championship, and you're better than Michigan State and Penn State, and we're going to a New Year's Six bowl game maybe even, you just showed again that you're nowhere close to Ohio State, so you're gone.
Yeah. I mean, New Year's Six bowls are nice and all, but I mean, if you can't beat your rival after, I mean, how many attempts has it been? 5?
See, 0-5, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. He's 0-5.
Yeah. And so about to be 0-6 probably this year. I'm an Ohio State fan, if you can't tell. Honestly. Speaking of Ohio State, I want to turn yeah. What do you think will be the whole thing with Kyle McCord and Quinn Ewers? How do you think that will shake out?
Oh boy. Well, I think it's inevitable that somebody leaves. I think it's actually inevitable that two people leave. So,
well, I mean, Jack Miller's going to be gone because I mean he's in the same class as Stroud. But I mean, you know, I'm from Texas. So, I mean, I've been keeping up with Quinn Ewers since however long. I mean, we're in the same graduation class and all that kind of stuff. And he goes to Ohio State, and I'm like, yes, let's go. And then I see Kyle McCord's a 5-star in the same class, and I'm like, oh God, you know, one of them's gonna have to transfer. I just don't know which one.
Well, that's the unfortunate thing about this whole thing is that it would be beautiful if they were staggered in class. It would be great to have one of them's a junior, one of them's a sophomore, one of them, and then one's still gonna leave because they still want to get on the field, but it's not like they're all log jammed. Pretty much, they're all basically either redshirt or true freshmen.
I wanted Quinn to stay in 2022, but then he came up in 2021. And I was like, oh God, because of NIL or whatever.
Yeah, but, it's I got to figure 2 are gone, and I don't know which 2 those are going to be because I think McCord and Ewers would both have a reasonable expectation to play very soon, meaning like next year, especially McCord.
Yeah. I think. Do you think that next year's Ohio State team will be better than this year's, considering that the talents will be a year older and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, if you look at their defense, because that's the area that needs to improve more than any. I'd want to go through all the various units, especially I'd want to go through all 3 layers on defense, all 3 levels, and the offensive line. We know that the 2 best receivers are gone, but they're so stacked at receiver that
I know, it's insane how exactly.
Yeah, it's the best unit in college football at any position. So, you know, the offensive line's so good. I'd have to look into, a projection on who's going to leave. They're going to be set at quarterback from a talent standpoint. The defense is going to be fascinating to watch over the last 6 games because it still needs to continue to improve. And we're going to know by the end of the year, okay, these 3 or 4 guys are emerging stars. And I'm trying to think who would leave off of that defense off the top of my head. We even had Proctor, who was a key loss, get hurt, so he'll come back. He was only
I completely forgot about that.
So, man, they're going to lose very little on defense. Shoot, all their linebackers left from last year. All those guys are young. Zach Harrison's only, a sophomore? Maybe Haskell Garrett's gone from the defense.
That's one thing that I'm very disappointed in this year with this team is the D-line. I thought
absolutely.
would be better.
Yeah, I made the statement.
I mean, against Minnesota.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, against Minnesota, I know that they're more of a run-heavy team, but I didn't see hardly any pass rush except. I mean, we had one, good play with that strip sack where Haskell took it into the end zone.
Yeah.
And then against Oregon, it felt like we couldn't get a pass rush all game. Hell, even Tulsa for at least the beginning of the game, or like the first half, I felt like we couldn't get a pass rush. I'm like, all right, is this how it's going to be all season? And then finally, I mean, they seem to find some sort of a mojo against Akron. Which, I mean, I know it's Akron, but I mean.
Yeah, it's Akron.
Yeah.
Akron had given up, I think, the most sacks in the country leading into that game or something like that. So this is what I'll say about the defensive line, and maybe I should have thought this through because it hit me after about the second or third game. I think after the Oregon game, it finally hit me that I thought during the offseason, I thought, okay, this defensive line, yes, the back seven needs to improve, but they're going to have a chance to take a breath and improve, and they're going to have games to improve because the defensive line, they can't help but be good. Like I thought they've got so much talent up there that they could either be like a wrecking crew, like we're seeing out of Georgia, where they're just devastating 2018 Clemson good, or even if they're not, they can't help but at least be good. But I guess taking into consideration, it does take guys time to develop. And so JTT and Jack Sawyer, those guys Sawyer was there, of course, in the spring, but JTT just stepped on campus at the beginning of August. So regardless of how talented they are, still takes a while to be a college football player.
I mean, and I don't remember. I mean, I don't keep up with I don't think Washington, like the state, had played high school football last year anyway.
Yeah.
Did they?
If they did, they played an extremely short season.
Yeah. So JTT, I mean,
yeah,
either played no season last year at all or a short season, and then also got into the program really late.
Yeah.
And then Sawyer is. I'm surprised they haven't given Sawyer more snaps than they have, but I mean, whatever. I was worried about the linebacker position after I can't think of his name right now, but the guy that against Akron that had gotten kicked off the team. I felt like we're kind of
Marquez Pope
at linebacker.
Yeah. Devon Pope. Can't remember his first name.
Yeah, I was going to say Kavon, but I didn't want to sound dumb and say the wrong name.
Well, I did. So, I appreciate the call.
All right, yeah.
Thank you so
started
much.
watching the show about a couple of weeks ago, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you. I'm glad you found us.
All right. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
All right, you have a good night.
You too. And that wraps it up for tonight. Bilal, thank you so much for the super chat. Hairball will throw some assistants under the bus yet again. So that's one of those deals that happens, but they already went through that cycle this past offseason where the head coach many times survives, but he's got to clean house. They cleaned house, and they're 6-0 right now. I expected them to be 4-2 right now, but that difference in record says more about their opponents than Michigan. Michigan is generally no better or worse than I expected them to be at this point. That 4-2 was based on me thinking Washington was going to be better and Wisconsin was going to be Wisconsin. That's what I was factoring in. Not that Michigan was going to be a lot worse. And so they're 6-0 right now instead of my projected 4-2 at this point. So I missed on that. But that, again, was more about the opponent's decline than Michigan being really any better. They just beat a decent Nebraska team by that much on the road. Michigan's gotten better. Good feel, good vibe. They feel great about being 6-0, but what's the best win? beating Nebraska by a field goal on the road. It's a good win. It's a decent win. It's not monumental. It's not Georgia beating Arkansas or Clemson. It's not Arkansas beating Texas. It's not Oklahoma beating Texas. It's not Oregon beating Ohio State. It's nothing close to that. They beat Nebraska by a field goal. They beat Rutgers by a score. Ohio State then murdered Rutgers. They trampled them. So, got to slam the brakes on, at least tap the brakes on Michigan. All right, everyone. Appreciate you being here, and we will announce the time for tomorrow night. And then, of course, Saturday, we go crazy with post-game shows all over the place here at the Voice of College Football. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App if you would like to contribute and bypass YouTube. We will see everybody soon, meaning tomorrow night. We got more videos coming your way. Please lock in on the other channels. So my ask here is that if you want us to grow, please subscribe to any channels that are under 1,000 subs, especially if you like that team. Of course, sub to that channel. But even if you don't like the team, here's my ask, that you sub to those channels that are under 1,000, especially that Iowa channel. It's growing fast. We're at about 550. Get that channel to 1,000. That's key in the YouTube algorithm. Get that channel to 1,000 subs. And then once we get to like 1,100, 1,200, unsubscribe if you want to. That's fine. But help us get to 1,000 on all the channels that are sub 1,000. We appreciate it. Thank you so much for all your help. We will see you tomorrow night.